Unusual heat for June has lasted for days now in Korea, with the mercury hitting 35 degrees Celsius in the capital today, while similar stories have been unfolding elsewhere across the globe. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, who's now on a trip to Paris, is set to address the World Expo Organization's General Assembly himself in support of the nation's poor city of Busan's bid to host the World Expo 2030. And with Japan's Fukushima water controversy becoming more politically charged at home, the government is rejecting opposition claims referring to nuclear wastewater being discharged into the ocean. It's June 19th, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol, who is now on his trip to Paris, will make a high-profile presentation tomorrow in support of Busan's bid to bring home the 2030 World Expo. This will be followed by a summit with his French counterpart, Emmanuel Macron, before embarking on a state visit to Vietnam. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
After much anticipation, the top office finally confirmed that President Yoon Suk-yeol will make his speech to the General Assembly of the Bureau International des Expositions in Paris on Tuesday in English to boost Busan's bid for 2030 World Expo. While it was already announced that Yoon would be in Paris for the BIE meeting, his office has refrained from confirming direct involvement from the president. But with Saudi Arabia's Mohammed bin Salman attending the BIE to push, the top office decided not to hold back anymore. The 30-minute presentation is regarded as one of the last opportunities for bidders to convince BIE's 179 member states. The top office also said the presentation will, quote, fill the 30 minutes allotted to it without a dull moment.
179개 회원국이 모두 참석하는 총회에서의 이번 프레젠테이션은 부산 엑스포가 가진 차별화된 비전을 보여주는 기회가 될 것입니다.
Experts say the president's involvement boosts Busan's chance to win the bid.
When members decide where to host the expo, the most important factor is how much that city wants it. President Yoon giving the presentation himself shows Busan's strong will to become the host for the 2030 World Expo, so it gives Busan a strong advantage.
The president will be the final speaker following Gangnam-style singer Psy, academics, as well as big-name entrepreneurs. Karina of K-pop girl group aespa and soprano Cho Soo-mi will take part virtually. Meanwhile, President Yoon wrote an op-ed in French newspaper Le Figaro last week to share his vision of Seoul-Paris ties. He expressed his commitment to joining hands with France on security issues, including North Korea and the war in Ukraine, saying that rules-based global order and peace are under threat amid intensifying conflict between liberal democracy and authoritarian forces. He said he will work with NATO members, including France, to restore peace in Ukraine. He also described Busan as the port city where young French soldiers landed during the Korean War to help defend South Korea, and a place that was once filled with war refugees only to become the city with the second largest transshipment volume in the world. As for his overseas trip, President Yoon, after his BIE presentation, will meet with French President Emmanuel Macron before a state visit to Vietnam on Thursday. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
With Japan's Fukushima wastewater release approaching amid the issue becoming more politically charged in neighboring Korea, the government says it opposes instigating public anxiety with provocative expressions, apparently targeting the main opposition. Our political correspondent Han Sung-woo has more.
Without referring to him by name, the South Korean government has asked the chairman of the main opposition, Democratic Party of Korea, Lee Jae-myung, to refrain from using expressions like nuclear wastewater to refer to the radioactive water Japan plans to start discharging from Fukushima into the Pacific Ocean this summer.
Choosing to use words like that stimulate excessive and unnecessary anxiety among the public, and the contraction in consumption that comes with it can inflict irreversible damage on fishermen and the fisheries industry as a whole.
Vice Minister of Oceans and Fisheries Song Sang-geun added during Monday's regular briefing on the Fukushima wastewater issue that recent news articles reporting that the contaminated water can reach the East Sea 5 to 7 months after being discharged is not true. His words were echoed by the head of Seoul National University's Research Institute of Oceanography, Cho Yang-gi.
Due to the large-scale circulation of seawater, it's estimated the radioactive water released from Fukushima will reach the waters of South Korea in about 10 years if it moves along the ocean currents.
But should the wastewater reach the coastal waters of Jeju in 7 months, as suggested by the Helmholtz Association of German Research Centers in Germany? Director Cho said that the concentration levels of the radioactive material there would be 1 trillionth of the levels found near the shores of Fukushima.
We're interpreting it as the near equivalent to the concentration levels of a drop of ink dropped into the Han River that is completely diluted after being dispersed underwater.
Data from the Korea Customs Service, meanwhile, showed that South Korean imports of Japanese seafood, in terms of amount, plunged by more than 30% last month compared to May of last year, likely in large part due to contamination concerns as the Fukushima wastewater release approaches. In response to such concerns, the government and the ruling People Power Party agreed during a policy consultation meeting on Sunday to increase the number of sites testing seawater radioactivity levels from the current 92 locations to 200. 한성우, Arirang News.
Across the border in North Korea, a key political conference there this past weekend made a rare admission of failure with regard to its recent space attempt. And the meeting ended without a speech from its leader Kim Jong-un, something the South Korean government said was very rare. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji with more.
On May 31st, a North Korean rocket carrying a military spy satellite crashed into the sea soon after liftoff. The failed launch was described as the most serious failure by the North at the ruling party's latest key meeting. The North state media said Monday that the officials responsible for the launch were criticized and were told to analyze the cause of the failure so that a military reconnaissance satellite can be successfully launched in the near future. One expert told Arirang News that it's not typical for the regime to admit failure and suggested 2 possible reasons as to why the North may have done this. Firstly, because it's obvious that the launch failed, as South Korea has already retrieved parts of the rocket and the information might have leaked to the North Korean public. And secondly, it needs North Korean scientists to take risks in order to make the regime's space program successful. He said this is what makes the Kim Jong-un regime different from the previous one.
Kim Jong-un is a little bit more aware that these things aren't always going to go smoothly, and he's willing to admit that. And that should help, in the long term, that should help the program be more successful.
Another thing to know from the 3-day ruling party meeting in Pyongyang was that it ended without a speech from its leader Kim Jong-un, even though he was present. The South Korean government said this is very rare and noted that it was the first time that Kim has not delivered a speech at a party plenary session. In a press release, the Unification Ministry assessed Monday that the regime appears to be showing a lack of confidence in carrying out its plan.
It's hard to tell why exactly Kim Jong-un did not deliver a speech. But we're assuming that it was probably difficult for him to come directly to the front, given that the satellite launch failed and that there haven't been many accomplishments in various fields, including the economy.
The ministry also said it's likely that the North will continue to carry out provocations throughout the rest of this year. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
Heatwave has blanketed South Korea for several days, with Seoul seeing temperatures spike to their highest in 26 years for June. As our Choi Soo-hyung reports, climate change is affecting the entire world, as not only Korea but also many other countries are suffering from higher temperatures.
For 3 consecutive days, South Korea's main cities, including the capital, have been hit by a heat wave, bringing much higher temperatures than usual. On Monday, the daytime high in Seoul reached over 35 degrees Celsius, surpassing the highest temperature recorded for the city in June since 1997.
I feel very weak from the heat as the temperature has been rising too high. But wearing short clothes at night, it feels very cold as I switched on my air conditioner earlier than last year because of the heat when I was sleeping. It's so tough and very challenging.
I'm worried because I think this is the start of the summer and they say the temperatures will reach as high as 40 degrees Celsius due to abnormal weather. That's why I'm concerned. The government issued a heatwave warning on Sunday for Seoul and major western cities such as Daejeon and Gwangju, which are also experiencing temperatures around 35 degrees. Officials said the extreme heat was being caused by the airflow from a migratory anticyclone.
Today, the migratory anticyclone is shifting away from northeast South Korea, bringing clear skies and hotter temperatures due to a southward airflow. As air flows in from the south, temperatures will rise even further, leading to hotter weather conditions.
According to the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, the estimated number of deaths due to heat-related illnesses this year has come earlier by over a month compared to last year. As of last Saturday, a total of 104 heat-related cases have been reported, which is 20 more than the same period last year. Not only in Korea, but also around the world, various countries have been experiencing an early heat wave in mid-June. The heat is causing a rise in related fatalities, including 54 deaths reported over the past 3 days in northern India, where temperatures have reached 40 to 45 degrees Celsius on consecutive days, accompanied by extreme weather events such as storms. It is expected that the early summer heat, with temperatures around 30 degrees Celsius, will continue in South Korea throughout most of June.
The early summer heat in South Korea is expected to break today with rain forecast from tomorrow until Thursday. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
The South Korean won recorded its highest level against the Japanese yen in 80 years, with the exchange rate dropping to the 801 range per 100 yen at one point on Monday morning. As Tokyo maintains its monetary easing policy, more people in Korea seem to purchase yen. Chung Eun-ju with the details.
The Korean won on Monday hit the 801 range per 100 Japanese yen for the first time in 8 years. As of 8:23 a.m., the arbitrage exchange rate using the dollar as the intermediary currency touched 897.49 won per 100 yen before rising slightly to the 901 range. The last time the 1 yen exchange rate dropped to the 801 range was in June 2015. The latest slide in the yen comes as Tokyo continues to maintain its monetary easing policy despite the rate hikes carried out by other major economies, including the United States and Europe. The Bank of Japan decided to keep short-term interest rates in the negative territory of 0.1% on the 16th, and the 10-year government bond yields at around 0%. This approach has caused the yen to depreciate, while the recent increase in the won's value due to expectations that the country's semiconductor market will recover has also affected the yen's drop. As the Japanese currency weakens, more people in South Korea are buying yen. According to market data, the amount of Japanese currency sold in South Korea's 4 major banks came to 30.16 billion yen, or roughly $213 million in May, soaring from 6.28 billion yen tallied a year earlier. The amount in deposits in the yen at those 4 banks also surged 16% from 697.8 billion yen in late May to 810 billion yen this month. The increase is attributed to eased COVID-19 travel restrictions, which have spurred more people to travel to Japan and people purchasing Japanese currency for future profit. Chung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
Shifting gears now, main opposition Democratic Party of Korea leader Lee Jae-myung slammed the Yoon administration's past year in office on Monday. In a negotiating body speech at the Nat'l Assembly, Lee pointed to what he called the government's incompetence in 5 sectors, namely the people's livelihoods, politics, foreign affairs, public safety, and even toward South Korean citizens themselves. The opposition leader mentioned the controversy surrounding Japan's release of radioactive water into the sea, suggesting that the government, together with the international community, should be open to the idea of providing financial assistance to Japan to store the water. Regarding relations with China, Lee said efforts must be made to resume supply chain cooperation with Beijing, while North Korea being another reason for cooperation. Lee also vowed to push for a supplementary budget worth around $27 billion to support small and mid-sized companies and to assist people with their housing costs. In Beijing, an 8-hour marathon interaction between U.S. and Chinese top diplomats has taken place as part of efforts to manage tensions. While no concrete consensus was reached, the parties have reportedly agreed to continue communicating. Tony Blinken's trip likely includes his meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Choi Min-jung has more.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has met with his Chinese counterpart Qin Gang in Beijing on a widely anticipated mission to lower the heightened U.S. China tensions. Both sides called Sunday's meeting candid and constructive. In a statement, the U.S. State Department said Blinken stressed the need to reduce the risk of misperception and miscalculation. The State Secretary also made clear that Washington will always work with its allies and partners to advance its vision for a world that is free, open, and upholds the international rules-based order. Meanwhile, China's state media quoted Qin as having pointed out that U.S.-China relations are at their lowest point. Qin remained firm in urging the U.S. to abide by the One China principle and to commit to not supporting Taiwan's independence. Although no major breakthrough was achieved, the two sides noted the importance of facilitating people-to-people exchanges between the two countries. Blinken also invited Qin to Washington to continue their discussions. Blinken's 2-day visit makes him Washington's highest-level official to visit China under the Biden administration. It also marks the first visit to China by a U.S. State Secretary in 5 years. Blinken had to delay his visit to China, which had been originally planned for February, due to controversy over an alleged Chinese spy balloon flying over U.S. airspace. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. Joining us in the studio is our sports editor, Paul Need. Hello, Paul.
Hello there.
So let's first start with football and the South Korean men's national team. Jurgen Klinsmann is still looking for his first win as manager, and he does seem to have a chance later this week.
Yes, that's right indeed. Yes, a 1-0 loss to Peru on Friday meant that it's 2 defeats and a draw for Klinsmann since taking over as boss in February. But yes, Korea are in action again on Tuesday night, though, taking on El Salvador at Daejeon World Cup Stadium at 8 p.m. Klinsmann won't have Kim Min-jae available as he is currently completing his basic military training for 3 weeks, while Captain Son Heung-min is a doubt, having recently had surgery on a hernia problem. Klinsmann, though, has hinted at something of an experimental lineup against the team that's ranked 75th in the world. As reported by Yonhap News, he said that he is thankful for the opportunity to bring in new players and give them a chance. Meanwhile, before Tuesday's match with the full national team, South Korea's under-24s, essentially the Asian Games squad, take on China tonight at 8:35 in the second of 2 friendlies. Korea won the first 3-1 on Thursday.
And named in the squad is Son Jun-ho, despite being held by the Chinese authorities for several weeks. So what's behind all that?
Yes, right. Well, Son Jun-ho was formally arrested on Sunday, 37 days after he was first detained. And reports say that he was first detained at an airport in Shanghai in what China has been calling a bribery investigation. Under Chinese law, a suspect can be detained and questioned for up to 37 days before a prosecutor approves an arrest. The arrest is part of a crackdown on match fixing in Chinese football. But the exact details have not been made public, nor have the Korean Football Association or the Korean consulate had much luck in being able to get any information from the Chinese authorities. The investigation could take several months, and Son can be held in custody during that time. He is currently on the books of Shandong Taishan in the Chinese Super League, and the midfielder featured for Korea during the World Cup in 2022.
Turning to golf now, a top 10 finish at the U.S. Open for Kim Ju-hyung.
Yes, that's right. He finished tied for 8th in what was his first ever top 10 finish at a major championship. At the Los Angeles Country Club on Sunday local time, Kim ended at 4 under par, 276. His final round saw him hit 5 birdies, 2 bogeys and 1 double bogey. And Kim began what was the 3rd major of the season with a 73, but then went on to hit a 68, a 66 and then a 69 to earn himself the accolade of being the top performing South Korean for the week. Meanwhile, in the women's game, Yang Hee-young came close to a 5th LPGA title of her career, but a late double bogey meant she was unable to end her drought of 4 years without an LPGA win. She finished tied for 3rd at the major LPGA Classic in Belmont, Michigan, 3 strokes behind winner Leona Maguire of Ireland.
And finally to Formula One. Max Verstappen is edging closer to really cementing himself as being one of the best of all time.
Yes, absolutely. His Canadian Grand Prix win on Sunday was his 41st, and this puts him level with the late great Ayrton Senna and 5th on the all-time list. Alan Prost with 51 and Sebastian Vettel with 54 will be next in Verstappen's sights. But his 6th win in 8 races this season has also given him a 69-point lead and was also a century of wins for him since joining Red Bull. Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso finished 2nd, Lewis Hamilton of Mercedes 3rd. Verstappen could beat Senna's record at the Austrian Grand Prix on July the 2nd.
All right, thanks for that. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. See you.
Baking hot conditions have prevailed over much of South Korea. Heatwave alerts for central regions will be lifted tomorrow as readings will be a couple notches lower than today. Maximum temperatures in Seoul will drop by about 5 degrees Celsius down to 30 degrees. Due to unstable atmospheric conditions, inland regions will see scattered outbreaks of rainfall. Rain clouds will be clustered across the south of the country. Jeju Island will see up to 40 millimeters. Southern regions and Chungcheongdo provinces will see 5 to 20. Along with spotty showers and hot temperatures, intense UV radiation is in the forecast. As you can see, most regions will see UV ray index in the high to very high range. Make sure to wear your sun protective items when heading out. Morning temperatures will be in the similar range tomorrow. Seoul will be starting off at 23 degrees. Rainy spells will be widespread for the daytime. Seoul will get up to 30 degrees, Daejeon 29, Gyeongju and Busan will be topping out at 26 degrees. On Wednesday, nationwide rain is in the forecast and temperatures will drop to 24 degrees. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session is coming up.
I'm live! 저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들
아무리 봐도 없지. 펜션 같은데 아니라고 아무도 안 하는 거고.
좋아요.
Busan, Korea is already reaching the entire world. Like ocean waves that travel far and wide. It's Busan, the perfect World Expo city. Transforming our world, navigating toward a better future. World Expo 2030, Busan, Korea.
Hello everyone, I'm Savitri Panaboke, Ambassador of Sri Lanka to the Republic of Korea. For people like me who is very interested to learn more about Korea, Arirang TV is a valuable source of information. Arirang TV is like a bridge that connects Korea to the rest of the world. I have learned so much about Korea's history, culture and people through Arirang. It is also a leading channel for news and diplomacy and current affairs, and I look forward to learning more about Korea through Arirang TV. Resonating with the world, Arirang.
춥지 않은가요? 처음 태어난 이별에서 사는 우리 손잡아요. 꽃 피는 동백섬에 부산항에 그리운 내 형제여. 어쩌다 마주친 그대 모습에 내 마음을 빼앗겨버렸네.
Hello everyone, it's Monday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. President Yoon Suk-yeol left on a trip today to France, where he will attend a BIE meeting and Vietnam. At the meeting in Paris, the president will deliver a speech in English as part of a presentation by South Korea supporting Busan's bid to host the 2030 World Expo. As this fourth presentation will be right before the actual selection of the host, eyes are on how South Korea will show off the port city's appeal to the 179 BIE members. What should the presentation focus on, and what strengths does Busan have compared to other candidates like Rome or Riyadh? To comment on this, we have invited Andrew Lim, the Research and Innovation Attaché at the Quebec Government Office in Seoul. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Andrew. President Yoon Suk-yeol will attend the BIE's General Assembly and be part of South Korea's fourth presentation in a bid to bring the 2030 World Expo to Busan. First of all, why is this fourth presentation so important?
So it's a great question. I mean, if you think about it, presidents actually going to this kind of event to present actually, and even in English, that's not a common thing. I mean, if you think about it, the other candidates, Riyadh, we mentioned MBS, for example, or Odessa, Ukraine, or if you also mentioned Italy, Rome, their presidents are definitely not traveling to go do this. And also, you mentioned fourth presentation. So it's generally the presentations, I mean, or the presenting to the members why they should actually choose the city. This, the numbers sometimes changes, but for this World Expo 2030, there'll be 5 presentations in total. So this is the fourth one. And why this is very important is because it's not fully set yet. Sometimes by the fourth one, we would kind of know, okay, this city will almost get chosen, so it's not that important. But still, right now, we're not too sure.
Right.
Yes, and I've been kind of seeing gauging the audiences and seeing how this is actually playing out. And Riyadh and Busan are kind of the front runners, one could say. Yes, and in that case, in that sense, fourth presentation is very important because it kind of sets the mood. Yes, right. The last one is coming up, and the last one will be months later, and in November is the final vote.
Right.
And June, November, it's pretty close.
Right, so through this fourth presentation, we can try to win more votes, right?
Exactly.
Right. President Yoon Suk-yeol himself is expected to give a speech, surprisingly. What's the advantage of having the president speak? And also, a government official underlined the importance of appealing to BIE members using this uniqueness of K-brand. How can such branding be used in the presentation?
So as I mentioned before, a head of state actually traveling to kind of promote this kind of event, it's not unheard of, but it's definitely not common.
Right.
Like I said, Italy or Ukraine, well, for reasons that we could kind of guess, their heads of states are not coming. And not only that, yes, Yoon, his first language is not English, but still he has practice, he's put in the effort, he's put in the time to actually try to present it in English, and there's a reason for that. He could have done it in Korean and do a simultaneous translation, but I'm sure using the international language to kind of spearhead this kind of movement, I think that's extremely important. So it's definitely not taken lightly. Other things that you'd want to mention is, you mentioned K-branding.
Right.
Yes, I think many people have heard of like K-drama or right. K-pop, but then this K-branding has been around for a long time. Like since the 2000s, they've always branded many things as K-something. It's just that back then Korea wasn't as famous, let's say. But now there's like K-food, of course, K-movies like Parasite, but even like cool things like K-quarantine, you probably heard of a couple of years ago. Thank God it's all over now, but I mean, there's K-quarantine, sharing Korea's knowledge on how to battle COVID. But even from my own personal experience, so some of my work I do in the Quebec government is with startups. So for example, the show that most Koreans go, or many Koreans go, is the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. You probably heard of the CES.
Right.
And many, the Ministry of Startup SMEs, Seoul government, many people go, and Korea is the second largest delegation. And in this particular event, they branded it as, they had a big booth and they branded it as K-Startup.
K-Startup.
Yes, that's pretty cool, because if you think about it, K yes, there are other countries with K, like for example, like Kenya, but then obviously they don't associate themselves with this kind of branding. So Korea kind of has a monopoly on this K branding. And I think this really goes a long way because I don't know many countries who actually do it like this. So Arirang, but also other news, they kind of name this as sales diplomacy, one could say. And I think that is kind of the President Yoon's kind of color, the way he does his diplomacy. He really wants to help the economy, so he gets out there, speaks English, and I think that it's a really big thing because especially it goes with past gains. Because as I mentioned, they've been using this K brand for a long time, and now really we're seeing the fruits of the labor.
Right. Well, President Yoon is actually going to be accompanied by representatives of the nation's top conglomerates to support the presentation. I'd like to ask you what their presence mean and what role they could play.
Oh, this is also very interesting because, yes, I don't want to compare too much, but it's still a competition.
Right.
So if you think about like the forerunner, Saudi, yes, they're rich, they have oil, they have Aramco, but they don't have these kind of conglomerate level companies, like global companies like Samsung who make phones or Hyundai who make cars. So in that sense, it gives you a very powerful leverage. One could say, hey, even the private sector is behind us. I'm sure the Saudi, Arabia, they have a private sector too, but it's not as developed, let's say, or it doesn't have these kind of powerful names that every person in the world, or most people in the world would recognize. They know, oh, we know Samsung, we use their phones, etc. I think that plays a big role. But not only that, what's really interesting is how the President Yoon, the current administration, and the conglomerates work together. So this is a little bit research that I did, and it can be a little bit internal, but how they do this kind of a collaboration is the president kind of works together, conglomerates, and tells them, hey, you take charge of these 30 countries, and LG is like, you take these 20, and Hyundai, you take these 30. It's because they have presence around the world, and they have already these relationships. So they kind of tap into that relationship as well. And how they can assign the countries, for example, maybe POSCO, for example, they are building battery factories in Quebec. So they have this kind of leverage. So they could tell them, hey, maybe you could take the Canadian part and try to kind of promote this and leverage with them. And I think that is something no other country could really do. Maybe the U.S., but I mean, U.S. is not part of this bid. So I think that plays a huge role in kind of securing this kind of bid.
Right. So leaders of conglomerates all being there could show us how the public sector and the private sector could work together to support the presentation. President Yoon pointed out that the presentation is an opportunity to showcase the distinctive vision of the Busan Expo. Now, what is it about Busan City that gives it a competitive edge compared to other countries' candidates?
Yes, another great question, because people would wonder why Busan? Like, yes, Odessa, maybe they're having some issues right now, but like Riyadh's it's a proper city, it's a capital city, it's a metropolis, so why Busan? I think one of the biggest things that people might not think about too much, but if you think about this, is 2030. So it's 7 years from now. Yes, I'm sure the world will be fine, but then you never know. Yes, we just had Corona, which is probably like a once-in-a-generation thing, but still, who knows, 2030, something might happen. But I think Busan, or Korea overall, is in a very good situation to be able to handle most things that we think might happen, like diseases. Korea has plenty of, we mentioned K-quarantine, they have a lot of experience. The other like instabilities like weather, things like that. We have great experience with that as well. So I think that is one of the biggest things. Will Busan still be, or Korea, for example, or even Asia, but mostly Korea, will it be in a good position in 2030? Because we could think about even like climate change. Yes, certain countries, maybe in the Middle East, maybe they're already battling desertification, and it's quite hot out there. And yes, Busan gets hot too, but I mean, if you compare to the other cities, these kind of stability issues. Of course, there's many other competitiveness too. If you think about the other cities, Busan has a waterfront.
Right.
It's a very famous beach. Yes, Heightened, we all know that. And that kind of waterfront comes with the culture. Yes, a little bit of partying too, but not necessarily just that, the alcohol, the festivities, and I mean, yes, you go to the exhibition and you could go chill at the beach.
Right, it has a lot to offer.
Yes, these kind of things, all the cities do not have this kind of competitive edge, so I think it's a very big deal.
Right, good to hear. Now, I believe this would be the last question, Andrew, but recently it is said that some voters that were originally in favor of Riyadh changed their minds and will vote for Busan as they chose to engage with Seoul on the topic of sustainable economic development. What can Busan show in terms of this area?
So this is actually one of the main reasons why I think Korea is kind of spearheading this Expo bid. So yes, Expo is great. It promotes Busan culture, all that stuff too. But it's also a time to showcase innovative technology.
Right.
You know, it could be automated vehicles, hydrogen tech, all that stuff. So Busan's already working on this. Busan is also, you probably know, is famous for their ports. It's probably around the top 10, or I would say the 5th biggest container port in the world. So they're already starting to kind of innovate in this way. So one really cool technology I want to mention is called smart piezoelectric system.
What is that?
So what this is we would think, okay, there's some kind of renewable system, maybe solar, whatnot, but no. Why I mention this is you could imagine in ports there's a lot of movement, or to be more specific, vibrations. And you know, trucks going in and out, and all the sound from the huge container trucks and all that creates a lot of vibrations. So this is kind of using vibrations or kinetic energy to generate energy. I think this is pretty cool.
Yeah,
because we've heard of solar and all that, but this, they've already had a pilot project, and they want to expand on this program. So this is one of the cool sustainable features. Also, you probably know Korea is one of the leaders in hydrogen energy. So they also they're working on this now to kind of showcase this when Busan Expo actually happens. So many of the big players like SK, Hyundai, they've already signed an agreement to kind of get this going too. There's also the floating city, I probably mentioned in some other episodes as well. They announced building a floating city in the northern port of Busan to showcase many new technologies, because you know, climate change, you know, there are the waters will rise, all that stuff. So hey, why not start working on this technology now? So by 2030, we'll be a leader.
Right, I see. Now, that's all the questions I have, Andrew. Let's have our fingers crossed to see successful for its presentation. Thank you for your insights. We really appreciate it.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Yes. All right. Now, while in France, President Yoon is also expected to hold a summit with French President Emmanuel Macron on the Élysée Palace in Paris on Tuesday local time. What discussions are expected to take place between the two leaders, and how significant is this summit? For more on this, we invited Professor Min Jung-hoon from the Korean National Diplomatic Academy into the studio. Professor Min, thank you for your time.
My pleasure always.
All right, first question. The two presidents are expected to share their plans and views regarding the Indo-Pacific region. What's the gist of each country's plan, and in what ways could they cooperate?
Yes, as you mentioned, President Yoon will hold a summit meeting with the French President Emmanuel Macron on Tuesday in Paris, and it will wrap up a series of summits with the leaders of all member states of the Group of 7 and the European Union, conducted over the past 2 months.
Right.
And the President's office announced that Yoon government pursues universal values like freedom, human rights, and the rule of law. And France is the origin of these universal values. So in the upcoming summit, there will be in-depth conversations about expanding cooperation between the two countries, South Korea and France, based on the universal values that two countries share. Specifically, it is expected that the two leaders will exchange their opinions about Indo-Pacific region based on their own Indo-Pacific strategy, and talk about cooperation on international security issues like Ukraine war and North Korea, and deal with artificial intelligence, space, and cutting-edge future industries. So I think that there will be various issues on security, economy, technology, and culture and human exchanges on the table in the upcoming summit.
Right, I see. Now, recently, Professor, President Yoon Suk-yeol actually wrote an op-ed in the French newspaper Le Figaro, and he highlighted possible cooperation on international security issues with France, as South Korea became the non-permanent member of the U.S. Security Council for 2024 to 2025. How could collaboration develop between the two countries in the international arena?
Yeah, in the newspaper contribution, President Yoon emphasized that South Korea and France share the universal values like the freedom, human rights, the international law. And he pointed out that the rule-based international order is in jeopardy, and that the two countries needed to closely work together to cope with the challenge. And the President Yoon also mentioned that as a non-permanent member of the 2024 and 2025 U.S. Security Council, South Korea is ready to cooperate closely with France on international security. In particular, he mentioned that South Korea would continue support for Ukraine.
Right.
In addition, President Yoon expressed his appreciation for France's consistent condemnation of North Korea's nuclear and missile programs and support for South Korea. I think that what President Yoon mentioned in the newspaper contribution provide a useful clue about what the two leaders will discuss in the upcoming summit.
Right.
So I think specifically as members of the U.S. Security Council, the South Korea, the permanent member, and the France and the permanent member, the two countries will closely work together in order to cope with international security issues, including consistently supporting Ukraine to peacefully end the war, and securing freedom of navigation and enhancing maritime security in the Indo-Pacific region, and persuading and pushing North Korea not to make another military provocation and bringing it back to the negotiating table for denuclearization.
Right, so they will be able to collaborate in a wide range of issues, including Ukraine and North Korea. Moving on to the economic ties. Both of the countries are already enjoying strong economic relations with their bilateral trade volume reaching $13 billion last year. But how can each country further benefit the other economically, and what kind of cooperation could be sought in terms of high-tech industries?
Yes, basically it is expected that economic issues will be mainly discussed in the upcoming summit with the international security issues. In his contribution to the French newspaper, President Yoon emphasized that South Korea and France needed to strengthen their economic partnership. He said that economic cooperation between the two countries needed to contribute to building a stable and resilient global supply chain. Specifically, if France makes investments in South Korea's the semiconductor, large volume battery, digital industry, and in return, South Korea makes investments in France's aerospace industry, there will be a great complementary effect and economic benefit for both countries. In addition, President Yoon suggested that South Korea and France will be able to work together for nuclear power and defense industries that are competitive in both countries. So in the upcoming summit, it is likely that the two leaders will confirm that the two countries, South Korea and France, are reliable and important economic partners for each other. And they talk about how they will work together to establish a stable and resilient global supply chain, and how they can improve their cooperation in the cutting-edge future industries like battery, semiconductor, large volume battery, and digital, aerospace, nuclear power, and defense industries. We can see that there are lots of the blue ocean things for the economic cooperations between the two countries. And considering that a large volume of the economic delegations will be accompanied in the presidential visit to France this time, it is expected that they will strengthen ties and enhance cooperation with their French counterparts during the visit.
Right, I see. Now, Professor, other than the bilateral summit between the President Yoon Suk-yeol and French President, President Yoon is expected to attend the dialogue with future generations and also be part of the Digital Vision Forum as well. What item on his schedule caught the most in your eye, and what do you expect from it?
Well, in his, again, the contribution to the French newspaper, President Yoon also pointed out that South Korea and France needed to strengthen their cultural partnership, including human exchange. He mentioned that the Korean film Parasite won the prize at the Cannes Film Festival, as well as the BTS and Blackpink. And he also expressed his hope that the cultural partnership between South Korea and France would become more special. Right? So I think that Dialogue for Future Generations and the Digital Vision Forum will provide the meaningful momentum for strengthening cultural and economic partnerships for the future generations between the two countries. As you know, improving human exchange based on the cultural interests is one of useful ways to enhance mutual trust and strengthen ties between two countries. And that will be definitely the case for the relationship between South Korea and France.
Right, no boundaries for cooperation. I'd like to ask you more questions, but since we are running out of time, I believe this will be the last question. The presidential office pointed out that President Yoon's summit with his French counterpart will wrap up a series of summits with the leaders of all member states of G7 and EU, like you said before, for over a little more than 2 months. What significance does it have? Could you briefly tell us?
Okay, so I talked about what President Yoon will discuss with the French counterpart in the upcoming summit. He will talk about the security, economy, technology, and the culture and human exchanges. I think that those main agendas in the upcoming summit clearly shows what South Korea want to do with the G7 countries and the European Union. So based on the value diplomacy, specifically, the South Korea want to strengthen its ties with European countries that share the universal values, and it want to closely work together with them to preserve the rule-based international order and to build a stable and resilient global supply chain. So personally, I think that South Korea is getting closer to the group of 7, and it is likely that South Korea will take more active roles and responsibilities in the international community as a global pivotal country.
All right, that's all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Professor Min, for your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.